if it's morning or is it? Oh yeah, it's still morning, right? I had Rose use some terminology of Titan, and I think it's fair to say that that's must be the height of flattery for anyone to call some of us Titans when we are talking about Philip Ochieng. Um, I, as a true son of the soil, I perhaps should have started by saying my names are, and apart from the rage that I'll get from Joe Dindo, I think that's the mere thought of what Philip would have thought about that would keep me awake the whole night. So uh, I want to say that unlike some of the people I see in this room, I never had the privilege of working closely with Philip. Philip was this enigmatic figure, almost a mythical figure that some of us heard about when we got into the newsroom. And even for the period that we worked in the same building, I met him a couple of times, but not in any way as to say things that would be uh, experiential in that way. But what I find so amazing is that the Philip that I read in those columns is the Philip that I hear many people talk about here. So I believe that he was a truly authentic person. Um, I never sought to find out some of the more mysterious things we had about him, such as that he never used to have a mobile phone, that he claimed it complicated his life. I never asked Wangedi whether that was true. There was also a rumor that he never drove himself, and I never again sought to find out because such was the almost mysticism that surrounded the persona of Philip Ochieng as we were getting into the newsroom those many years ago. So as we are here to celebrate the life of this great journalist, I think many of us would be reminded of just how important our trade is, because this is someone who had a great impact. Just listening to the very different generations of people who have eulogized him since he departed just a couple of days ago, I think is testament to the great journalist that Philip was and the great legacy that he has left, even as we sit here today to remember and to celebrate the footprints, the many footprints that are truly eternal that he has left on our shores as he passed by here. Um, Many, of course, will remember the grammar lessons, but I think that they were really more than that. I think Philip, as some people have noted here, had this unique ability to basically discuss everything under the sun and do so with a considerable degree of competence that would inspire anybody who had an interest. It is only Philip who would explain with a straight face in some of those columns that the word Oriental had certain roots in the Luo language, and that was quite interesting when I saw that, because Philip Ochieng was many things. He was both intellectual and journalistic. I know that Dr. Professor Nyabuga will ask me whether those two things don't usually go together. But anytime people move to the academy, there is always fear amongst us as journalists that we have finally lost them. But I think Philip was able to straddle both worlds of intellectualism and hard-nosed journalism that who dealt with day-to-day questions, even though he dealt with them in his own way. And Philip was, as someone said, he was cantankerous and provocative, and he was also annoying, but he was so beautifully so that he got away with it, that you would not read his columns and feel nothing. That was Philip. And I think that that is a great lesson for us. We always say in this business that if you did something that nobody said anything about, then perhaps you didn't do anything at all. And I think Philip in very, very special ways. He had what I think some people have rightly said. He had almost a certain kind of literally impunity. I had the students who were talking about the license he had to even attempt to create certain words. And of course, many of us who are Kenyan would know the kind of impatience he had with things like I can be able to do something. Like, for example, the big quarrel about several times and severally, the question of continuously or is it continually, and all of these things we will keep remembering. And for some of us who um, sub copy, some of those things will hit you, and then you can remember a certain column that you read by Philip Ochen. So I think that as we are here celebrating, we must remember the many things. Actually, when I was looking at reading a few things that people have said, I bumped into a certain interview that he did with someone who was doing an academic paper. I think it should have been probably 15 years ago. And so Philip is quoted because this person, I think her name is Rebecca, was trying to find out something about the use of language in Kenyan newspapers, and he did a content analysis of the Sunday Nation. And so he interviewed Philip about the kind of environment in which they did their trade. And Philip said this, and I'm quoting, "We have a problem that some of our staff can't think in English, but rather in their mother tongue. This affects the quality of the newspaper in that thinking is done in the mother tongue and translated into English." Then he said there's an even more serious problem. We have in Kenya today people who are neither efficient in their mother tongue nor in English. They are tongueless. They are ignorant. They suffer from speech illiteracy. If somebody tells me you are lost, I immediately shoot back that is not English. That was Philip. The things that we say all the time and imagine that they make sense, and he didn't fear. Have you ever found words that everybody uses that you almost think correcting them would be a terrible thing? So he had that courage to stand up for what he truly believed, at least from seeing his writings. So as I finish, I think that this period of reflecting back on the life of such a great journalist to have graced our lives as fellow scribes, as some of us who are walking in his footsteps, standing on his shoulders. I think what this moment calls for us is for us to get back to the basics of our business. I think there's so much that we've lost along the way as journalists, as circumstances change, as the environment in which we work has changed. But I think that the writings and the general behavior of this great man in our midst should push us to get back to square one, as someone said, about what is truly important about the work that we do. That even though technology has moved some ways since the days that he entered a newsroom, that the work we do as journalists has not changed, even if the means, the tools, and perhaps the environment in which we do it may have changed considerably over time. So as I finish, I'm not typically given to quoting Shakespeare, but what else can anybody quote when we are talking about the memory of Philip Ochieng? And so I will go a bit cliche and just quote the famous oration of Mark Antony at Caesar's funeral, that here is Caesar. Here goes Caesar. Shall we say here goes Philip? From amidst whence cometh such another? I think it is a question we must ask ourselves. Are there more Philips left in our midst? Are there people who will stand for the straight and narrow of our business? People will not cut corners with how journalism is supposed to be done. I think that's a challenge that Philip Ochieng leaves us with today as we remember his well-lived life and as we await for somebody, hopefully, to stand someday and say certain things about us when we go that same route. Because at the end of the day, I think it is what people remember us with that will really count. And so let me also say, and so ends the story. Thank you very much.
We're now going to shift online to those of